Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America, brought to you by Accuracy in Academia. I'm your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to March Madness.
Yeah, we can talk about we can talk about basketball, or we can talk about the weather sometimes.
Yeah. All kind of madness. The long list of stuff you sent me already.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like every time I think I've turned, we've turned the corner, I'm like, okay, I don't, maybe don't have to, use, the heavy covers and for bed or whatever, and or I don't have to turn the heat on very much. It's like, boom, we go from 60 to 40, and then go back up again.
Yeah, you have your heater on high and your air conditioner on high in the same day this time of year a lot.
That's true. I mean, that's true. I mean, in the car, car kind of adjusts to, what it thinks, it should be pumping out. So, at least in my car. So, when it's cold, it'll, you set the temperature and it's giving you heat. And as the temperature rises, it starts to give you some AC. But this weather has been kind of up and down. So sometimes I get, it's kind of a marginal thing, in terms of which way it should be going. Maybe I like a little heat when I'm getting cool.
Right. It's hard to get, like, most places you go now, they're either too hot or too cold.
Yeah.
Because people try to keep that heat going, and it's like, it's too warm for that,
Well, hopefully at least one thing is it'll, as I mentioned, numerous times, I'm on the Nextdoor app, and so that's just a whole bunch of stuff. And you never know what people are going to throw on there and comment about. Political stuff is usually frowned upon, and once you post something political, usually whoever the moderator is usually, deletes it or whatever. But one hot topic during the winter has been high electricity prices, utility prices. So I think the majority of that will go away because we're now heading into a stretch of better weather, and we probably won't really need the air conditioner, and hopefully hopefully not until May or June. So it gives people some relief. But I'm gonna have to tell you, I'm a little bit perplexed with what people are doing in the winter with their heating. I mean, I'm chintzy, and I keep mine on the low end of things, the real low end of things. And yeah, I'm probably paying a little bit more because I had to probably use it more than I did last year.
But it's coldest winter in like 23 years. It was.
Yeah. And I think people have
the winter.
Yeah, and I think people have to factor that in. I don't think, they see the price that they're, when they get the bill, but they don't quite understand. They don't really think about how cold was it. Did you, check your bills, by comparison. It's not just a dollar amount. It's how much energy did you use year to year. And you're probably going to see a significant spike in the amount of energy you used a year ago to this year, say starting in December and going through February and early March. So people aren't, they do just get the sticker shock when they get these large bills. And, my bills are not super cheap, but, they haven't probably been this high for a number of years. But even so, because of the solar panels and other things like this, they're really, to my recollection, and I'm not sitting here doing a lot of fact checking on this, they're really back. This winter it was really kind of back to for heat, electricity. It's probably what I was paying 10 years ago when I didn't have the solar panels, that kind of a thing. So it's a little more than I paid last year, but it isn't $700, $800, $900 type of thing like that, which people are just, flipping out over. So hopefully that'll calm them down. You get into these, you watch these people debate the energy thing, and there's just like, okay, I was like, I'm not even going to read all these comments because it's just, they're just, some of them are nonsensical. And it's, a lot of it's directed at the AI data centers, PJM, which runs the grid in the metropolitan area, and so they're looking at corporate greed with the energy companies, so I was like, yeah, okay, fine. You didn't complain about it before, now complain about it now. And a lot of them don't even realize that, what they did years ago has a dramatic effect on now, because, we had a period of time many years ago, where, energy suppliers, just flooded the market with teaser rates. And, I didn't realize this, how bad this was. But I kind of got hit with it for a couple of months or whatever before I woke up and said, oh, wait a minute here. If you don't keep a careful eye on it, they're going to give you this rate for 6 months, but they don't flip you over to, say, the Pepco rate, or the Washington Gas rate, or whatever, the BG&E rate. You guys have got what, Dominion
Virginia
Energy,
Power,
Virginia Power. They
the
don't do
Monday,
that
Dominion.
automatically. They have, they have a they have a different rate structure, and so, which can be significantly higher than your local utility, but they got you. And if you're not paying attention, you kind of, people thinking like, oh gosh, I'm saving, 1 cent per, kilowatt hour, and they don't realize that after 6 months or a year, the rate could go significantly higher than the local utility. And then they don't, so there's, and the more energy you use, the more that's going to cost you. So, all of those things add up. So people are getting a little bit of an education one way or the other. And, I always figure it'll sort itself out.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
So anyway, so is the weather
What they're
good?
talking about next winter, by the way, while we're on that topic, is
Yeah.
so there's this big El Nino gathering in the Pacific, in the eastern Pacific Ocean, off the coast of northern South America. And it's the biggest one we've seen in a long time. And when there's big El Ninos, the effect here is that we're less likely to see hurricanes. And like they're saying, we probably will not see a hurricane this summer, which means batten down the hatches, because they've been saying we would be seeing a lot of hurricanes and we haven't seen any. But next winter, you are susceptible to blizzards, but not to long periods of enduring cold like we had this year. So, if you get your blizzard, you have to stay home a few days till they shovel it out, and then it melts in a week. I can live with that. It's these ones, the snowcrete for 6 weeks, where, not one snowflake melted or moved in any direction at any time for 6 weeks. Those are hard. That's hard to that's hard to get through. That's
Right.
That's
Yeah. No, I mean, the occasional snowstorm that actually, where the snow actually melts in a few days, that's fine. I can live with that. But as you said, the hardened snow, that just doesn't go anywhere because of the extreme cold.
Can't plow it, can't shovel it, can't move it at all. You just got to live with it.
Yeah. No, it's just, that was a heck of a winter we just had. So I'm just gonna quickly add. So are you ready to hit the links when you can?
No, my back is terrible. It'll be a long time before I cough.
Yeah. All right. Well, wish you the best on getting back on there. I'm sure you must be chomping at the bit for that one.
Yeah, it's killing me. And like, I'm trying to watch it on TV, and I'm like, nah, let's change the channel. Can't do it.
All right. Well, today I had to throw this one out. Today is National Spinach Day. So do you eat spinach? I know.
I find uses for it. I'm not a big fan, but like, you can throw it on a salad.
Right. So I threw this in there only, mainly because, I mean, you and I are close in age, and I remember watching lots and lots of Popeye on television, the cartoon, and the whole thing was about spinach, right? The bulging muscles. He opens a can and, downs the spinach, and he turns into this, this super strong man.
It all just come pouring out of that can.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know a lot of people who could actually down spinach straight on like that. But so I ate a lot of spinach as a kid, which may be the reason why I eat far less spinach as an adult. Though as I got older, I'm thinking like, I need a little more roughage and whatever, and so I'm much more amenable to seeing that into my salad. But
I'm like that with the chicken pot pies. Like when I was a kid, like my dad, he was an electrician, so sometimes there was no electrical work at all, right? So every once in a while, sometimes the budget got low, and so we would eat these chicken pot pies. And I will not eat a chicken pot pie.
Yeah,
No, sir.
isn't that funny though? I mean,
Yeah.
this is our life, our adult life. It is a lot of times some of the eating choices are now determined by how much we ate of something as a child.
Yeah. How much we will never touch it again.
Yeah, I mean, so it's spinach, and there was, and it was, I don't know how many Swanson, TV dinners I ate. Now I enjoyed them as a kid because it wasn't as much, the main part of the meal.
Yeah.
I was going for the dessert,
Yeah.
the brownie part or the
little cobbler, yeah, they have little
cobbler things, right? All that stuff. That was like the treat. It's like, yeah, because my mom she never did desserts, so that was it. And yeah, so but now I don't, I've hardly eaten a TV dinner in the last 40 something years.
Yeah.
And I'm not looking forward to eating. You have to force me. I mean, if there's nothing else left, I will eat a TV dinner. But the times have changed. It's like we can get so much other food now than we could 30, 40 years ago. It's like I don't need that.
Yeah, and you can even get stuff that you can pull out of the box and microwave that's better than a TV dinner.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of there's kind of like specialty things, things that just kind of have stuff that's really appealing actually, and actually tastes pretty good. So you can do that as well. But you like to cook. My wife likes to cook, so I've been largely spared TV dinners. So that my mother kind of liked to cook, but I was the only child. My father would always come home late, and so it was kind of like the convenient thing was like just give me a TV dinner, and I was happy, and I would actually sit in front of the TV and eat it. So
so we had the big family dinners, the arguments, and all that kind of stuff. Right. Like I was family. I had 4 kids, and I'm third out of the 4, and yeah, we all sat around and had it out.
Well, good for bigger families too.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got a little bit of news here. So we've got this whole thing in Iran, and we're up to day 27 or thereabouts, and both sides, U.S. and Iran, are saying different things. I tend to think that there's probably a lot of back channel things going on here that we're not knowing about. Trump is always going to be Trump and say all these things, sometimes outrageous or just to try to get more attention. And he, what he says these days, definitely with Iran, because the markets are nervous, will drive the markets one way or the other. I mean, when it looked like he was, that maybe he was looking to try to get to a resolution in 5 days, the market exploded. When they realized that it's probably going to take longer than that, they've kind of gone into reverse and kind of quieted down. Oil prices have been bouncing around, but they've stayed in a relatively narrow band. So gas prices have risen, but I think we're near at least the short-term peak, unless something else surprising happens. Right. At this point in time, but on at least publicly, the Trump administration and Iran are saying completely different things in terms of where they are on this. But Iran's demands is like, never bomb us again or never attack us again, blah, 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 all this stuff. Like, no, I mean, they have stuff that's never going to fly.
Well, so it's come out in the last few hours that, Trump put out something that they gave him a gift, right? It's like, it's a really beautiful gift. And if it turns out to be what I think it is and work like I think it will, then it's a signal that they're ready to make a deal and agree to our terms, right? And so the gift was to let 4 ships pass through the strait, 4 oil loaded ships, American flagged ships pass through the strait, which is only about 25, 30 miles across. So, it's imminently hittable. You can't really protect it from some kind of attack. You can go attack the attackers and eliminate the threat, but to stop the initial attack is really difficult in that little bit of space. So, but they let the 4 ships pass through. So that means that whoever Trump is negotiating with has the power to stop the ships from getting hit, to tell the commanders, don't fire on these ships. So, which means that he's gotten to the right person, and that the other people claiming to be the right person are not the right person. And the people, I believe, if I'm reading all this correctly, the people not the right person category include the mullahs, include the son of the Ayatollah. I guess he was Ayatollah 4 this month. But they can't find him. They think he is either dead or nearly dead, and he's had at least a leg and maybe an arm amputated in a U.S. strike. So I think the Iranians have gotten the message that we are serious about this, and that we have the capability to blow them up, to finish this off in a way that won't leave any of the country standing or viable. And so it's a matter of how much damage do you want to inflict on your people. They get a vote. They have some armaments. I think it kind of changed a lot of thinking when they sent a missile to Diego Garcia, what was important about that. Diego Garcia is an island in the Indian Ocean. There's an air base on there that's RAF, the UK's Air Force, and we use it. We have deals with them, our supposedly closest ally, and all this stuff, that to use it as needed. And we, for years, the United States has done its Middle East business based out of Diego Garcia. It's easy to get the planes there. On the night when the Iraq War started, those planes flew from Barksdale in Shreveport or Bossier City to Baghdad, dropped their bombs, and then flew to Diego Garcia. That was a place for them to land and do their thing. So it's been with us. This has been part of our way of doing this for a long time. But what it showed was that the Iranian missile capability had a range far more than anybody had guessed, right? Even the Israelis, who usually have a pretty good handle on these things. So, now suddenly Europe is in range. They didn't know that before, but now they do. And so now Europe has become a lot more concerned with how they might go about helping us in this situation. So you're seeing European units, European Navy, European commandos being dispatched to the Gulf to finish the job here, to guard the strait. The guarding of the strait, if it needs to be done, if it's going to be threatened, is something that the United States should make sure it happens, but we shouldn't be the one who make it happen, because what passes through the strait is not really of much concern to us. It's more a concern to the rest of the world, especially some of our geopolitical adversaries, including China, are a lot more dependent on oil being able to pass through there than we are. We got all we need. We don't need them at all.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be an interesting situation here in terms of where we go from here. I mean, I still think we do have the upper hand in a lot of things, but the Strait of Hormuz is the tricky part of all of this. And now that we're about almost a month into this, the concern, I think, is really just the fact that no one really can get any oil through that strait, and so that this is one of the reasons as supply constricts. This is why we've been seeing prices spike, especially if it's diesel. I just saw the story. I kind of forgot about this station. I think I remember hearing about it. So there's a gas station in California that is, I guess, infamous for its high prices, and so they get a lot of media attention. So much so that they have the attendant apparently went out to some reporter and said, please leave, it's private property, because they were selling regular gas in California the other day for $8.91 a gallon, okay, which is about $3 higher than the average price of gas in California, which is already outrageous. And yet the thing is that it's situated in such a place that they actually do halfway decent business even at that price, because people say, I need to at least top my tank off or do something. I need some gas. I get a few gallons. So they do sell gas, but it's just incredible, to me that, they can put a price up like that and people actually buy it. Now, the price of gas there's a lot of factors in there. There's transportation. It's the cost of land. You don't know how many of these operations are still company owned versus the franchise owned, locally operated. Kind of a thing like that. There's just so many different factors in there. But I always hate it every time gas prices shoot up like this, where everybody's like, "Oh, these guys are getting greedy" and all of this stuff. It's like the fact of the matter in general is that the cost of what they're taking in, the oil, the gas they're getting in, is going up. And at the wholesale level, and they've got to, but I think you and I both talked about this last week, is that it does tend to rise a lot faster, even before they get the pricier gas. The price has already gone up, and I'm like,
Right.
oh, I hate that.
Yeah, their record ain't perfect on that one.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the thing is that margins on regular gas, they keep it pretty thin. They make a lot more money on on the mid grade and the premium. They make plenty of money on the diesel, because the diesel is not as expensive even as regular gas. But we've seen. I mean, we're seeing the price of diesel, well over $5. And as I've said before, it's like I get concerned about all the people who use diesel. All the my lawn care people, all these other things. They're Montgomery County school buses. Now they're getting rid of EVs.
Well, the other thing to know about diesel fuel is diesel fuel pretty much equals home heating oil, right? That's what home heating oil is.
Right.
They're the same thing. So when you start thinking about, how many people are you relying on that? So if diesel goes way up, so does that.
Yeah, and I think they're different grades of diesel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but I mean, it's that comes out of the same.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Pipe,
and jet fuel has its own category there too.
Yeah.
But that also gets affected, where it's like, I'm glad I bought my ticket to Utah, a month ago or whatever, because I haven't checked to see. I can only imagine right now that, it's much higher, but there's, the airlines are struggling with higher jet fuel prices, which they're going to increase their prices, but then that softens demand for the flights at the same point in time. So then, they're seeing drop off in, like some overseas flights and stuff like that. My wife has been checking. She's like, we need to go back overseas. Probably have to look at the fall. And then the other day she goes, "Ooh, we have an opportunity to go in April." I'm like, "Really?" It's like, okay. I'm like, "You're in charge of this. You got to tell me what you want to do, and I'll look at the calendar. If it makes sense, we will go ahead and book it and do it." But there, that window of opportunity could be very small before somebody else says, "Oh, that's too good to pass up. I'm going to go no matter what." In all this, I get, we'll have to see how this goes. I'm hoping things get better. Now, the other thing too, which is kind of up your alley in a sense, is just that we see the Postal Service putting surcharges on their bigger package mail for the first time ever. And they're going to do that until January. As if that's, that'll help them a little bit, but that doesn't solve their long-term problem.
Right. The Postal Service is, that's not really the volatility of the fuel market there. That's really that's a management failure. People trash DeJoy, but he was doing what has to be done to the Postal Service. Like it has to be changed. The cost structures have to change. They're trying to do too much for too little. They have really good competitors for most of their business. I'm not sure why they're in the package business, right? We have private people to do packages. And the reason is that's the part of their business that's profitable, right? We don't send birthday cards and mail bills and anything like that anymore, right? So, they're competing. They're only part of their business that has any vitality, any growth to it is the part that has some of the most efficient, experienced, established competitors, in the entire economy. So, it's an uphill battle, and they, dumping all the pension cost into, the Social Security was not the answer, right? It wasn't really a pension cost issue. It is an issue of you're operating a business that always loses money and will not stop losing money under the present conditions.
Yeah, I mean, they've lived with us for a number of years, and you know, really, I mean, what exacerbated their problems was this change. I mean, you talk about, the birthday cards, and I mean, I think Christmas cards or bills. A lot of the stuff has gone online. I mean, uh, I haven't mailed a payment for a credit card bill or utility bill in years. You
Yeah,
know, not a lot of people don't like the automatic withdrawal, but I like the set it and forget it feature just because it's like it's attached to a bank account that I always has the funds available to pay. They take the money out, and I'm not going to pay any interest or late charges. Okay,
right,
so that it's not I don't have to trust the postal service if they deliver something late
right.
or whatever, and or if I can't if
Lose your mail, whatever.
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, once you set up auto pay, if there's a problem, you can always call the bank and say, "Hey, it's already on auto pay. What's the problem here? What did you do here?" And stuff like that. So, I'm fine with that. Not everybody is, but I'm perfectly fine with that. And it keeps the nobody's going to cut off my electricity or anything like that. It just everything flows, and I have I don't have to worry about that stuff. I can worry about the bigger things that I need to worry about. Um, Package delivery, yeah. Look, my wife loves it. We don't use it a lot, but we have grandchildren in Indiana, and what she invariably will do several times a year is get one of those medium priority mailboxes, it's a great deal because it's basically stuff as much as you can into the box, and it's a flat rate box. And she's pretty good about making that box bulge, get it taped up, and sends it for a price that I don't think UPS can compete with, and doing it. I mean, she's done this so many times that when our older grandchildren were smaller, she had one of the granddaughters said, Grandma, just put it in a box and mail it to me.
that's what
So
grandma does. That's pretty
yeah,
cool.
so you never know. It's just kind of it's amusing. So we like that. We like that feature, but I mean, like I said, I rarely use first class mail for anything, and so it's just one of those things. And that at one point in time, at least, it had a lot of volume, and the volume there is just dropped, like a rock. So yeah,
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's basically
yeah.
it.
I mean, look, I mean, to be honest, eh, I mean, so I mean, the other part of another part of the business that has gone away, are uh, reports, annual reports from companies, public companies that to their shareholders.
Yeah,
In essence, they've made most of those electronic, and so where my mailbox used to get stuffed with all these things, and if I went away for any length of time, I'd have to tell post office hold the mail, and then they deliver a bucket or more worth of mail. If I tell them to hold my mail now for 5 days, it I not only do that so it doesn't look I don't want mail to fly out of the box or whatever. I get it delivered just before I get home, and it's usually just a small bundle with a rubber band around it, right?
yeah,
It's like my mail volume incoming has dropped precipitously. I don't
yeah,
I don't get anywhere, and 95% of it are mailers. They're like they're like John said, grocery ads, political mailers, business things. We want you to attend this seminar, or we want to sell you this product or whatever, and,
yeah,
and that's pretty much it. Maybe yeah, maybe one of Leadership Institute or somebody like that will say, send me money or whatever. So that type of thing. So by and large, my mail volume has just shrunk. And if I get more than two or three pieces of mail a day versus the 25 or 30 that I used to get, that's a big day.
yeah, yeah. That's the way it is most of the time.
Yeah. So I mean, this once again, it just says you need to find a way to privatize this, but and figure
Well,
out
the problem is
figure out the last mile issue. That's the biggest
they have
problem.
the last mile issue. They have universal service obligation that they will
Right.
bring you mail wherever you live, and you know, but do they have to bring it every day? I mean, is there
No.
really? could we get it down to like, I think Boston somewhere, they said 3 days a week, and no one noticed. They didn't even notice that that there wasn't mail for 2 days. You'll inevitably have somebody older than us say, "Oh, I'll get my medicine in the mail." It's like, okay, you got to get it Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Order ahead. That's another thing. Set it and forget it. So
yeah. I mean, look, businesses they complain initially about receipts, when their customers sending their bills in by mail, but a lot of people have now set it up so that they just use it electronically. They send the money electronically, not using a credit card, but they can use the PayPal or Venmo system and things like that. And there might be a slight cost to that, but there's a cost to every business of cashing a check. Somebody's got to prepare a deposit and get it to the bank. So I think that's a kind of a wash. Just you can find better ways of doing this in this world. So anyway, I've eaten up too much time on that stuff. This one I thought was interesting, and I want to keep moving along here. Cesar Chavez, all these allegations against the great labor union, farm worker hero, totally exploded. It has blown up in California's face because they've got everything under the sun, kind of named after them. They're doing the parades. They got the streets, schools, everything like this, and they can't work fast enough to remove his name from all these things and change things around. When Dolores Huerta, came forward at 96 years old and talked about how she'd been raped twice and had 2 kids with him and all of this stuff, that really blew up because she was the right-hand person to Cesar Chavez. And, this totally has taken down, a left-wing icon, here. It's been, I remember him when I was a kid.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I remember, he was organizing the farm labor, farm workers, and, they weren't going to pick lettuce one year. I don't know if you remember that, you're going to get any lettuce because they're going to not pick lettuce. I'm like, someone's going to pick lettuce. It'll happen. And it did. But yeah, this was a guy who was a very cynical, very leftist, totalitarian guy who, it was not, and the left has bad problem with picking heroes, right? George Floyd is a hero. They're building statues to George Floyd. Not going to understand if you say, okay, the cops were too rough on him or whatever. Shouldn't have kneeled on him. They didn't kneel on his neck. That, but without getting into all that, you say the cops are too rough. Okay, I understand that, but we don't build a statue to people who the cops are too rough on. That doesn't get you a statue, right? That doesn't make you a hero. It makes you a victim of police abuse, if indeed that's even the case with Floyd. Right, he was, after all, arrested on legit charges, had a long criminal record, and was resisting arrest. Right, let's not forget, how did we get here? Right, so they've always had a hard time picking heroes and bolstering people who are not good people at all. So, and I think this is an example of that, and I'm kind of glad to see it because it's going to make them abandon their ideals again. So the more you see of that, I think the better.
Watch out when you worship false idols.
That's right.
All right, keep moving along here. Supreme Court oral arguments. It looks like they are leaning towards banning the late arrival of mail-in ballots. I think that's a great victory. If
it happens.
If it happens, but they oral arguments, they get a pretty good idea of which way the court is thinking. At least it's going to be months before they issue their final ruling and whatnot. If they don't, it would be quite a surprise. But the fact that we've even gotten to this level makes me wonder at times. But this is definitely something that needed to be addressed one way or another because. Look, I'm okay. States have to, states set their own rules on election policy in terms of when you can vote and all those stuff. But we have gotten out of hand with the mail-in voting and the allowance, particularly of exactly what constitutes a ballot that can be counted in terms of when it's received. And so, the argument here really is that it needs to be received by election day.
And
Okay.
counted. And
And
counted
counted.
on election
Yeah.
day.
And not 3 days after, not a week
Right.
after, not the
Not when
postmark.
you get a chance to see what you need.
Right.
All
Yeah,
the honest election counting happens on election day, because then
Yeah.
no one knows what those other precincts have, and they can't match up need with vote totals. So once it goes past that first day, they know what they need. And no election that takes place under those circumstances should be trusted, right? I mean, no close election. I guess it's 80-2 or whatever would happen, right?
Yeah. And,
go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, the thing too is that you remember, when we were growing up, uh, there's the absentee ballot, voting has been around, but there were very clear,
It
rules
was
on
very
that.
few people, and it's like if you could prove you had to be out of the state that day for a vital function, or you were a soldier, right? And everybody else was no. The answer is no. So, and I think we should go back to the presumption being you cannot do this, right? Like some people, you're a doctor, and hey, I got to be out of the state doctoring, saving lives. Okay, we can look at that one, right? But it ought to be, decided on a true case, not a class basis. Like all you doctors can go, because not all doctors need to go, right? A lot of the doctors can go cast their ballot on election day. But I am all for. I've always said that I would make the compromise of making election day a holiday if election day could be election day, right? I think it's a shibboleth that we need it to be a holiday. I don't think that there's very many people in America at all who can't vote because their work day is so long and arduous, and their boss is such a jerk that they can't get time either early in the morning or late at night to go to the polls, right? There's probably a few Americans out there, and shame on their bosses for not letting them do that, right? For on the own election day, taking a few minutes to go vote. But beyond that, there's not really any excuses, right? Go get it, and they let you stay in line. If you're in the line at 7:59 and it closes at 8, you get to vote, right? Even if it takes a long time, right? That to me is fair. But that night, when we close up, right? That night before anybody goes to bed, you counted all your votes, you turned your votes in, all the votes are tallied up. I think the thing about, you can say what you want, people go still arguing about whether there's enough evidence that 2020 was a fraudulent election. You will never get, and it's still about what 60% of the country thinks it was a fraudulent election. Even there's right at half of Democrats think it was a fraudulent election. Now, why would they think that? And the reason is because there was so long in the delay of counting the votes, right? Pennsylvania was accepting them a week after, and just throwing them into the vote totals. And so Pennsylvania ended up with 109% turnout that election. How do you get 109% turnout? Not legally, not playing it straight, right? There's no way you could get that. So, if you want to curtail corruption and win and keep the trust of the voters, you cannot have these elections where you can turn in votes for another week and count them for a week after that and all that. It's got to be counted that day.
Yeah, look, I don't, like I said before, I put 2020 in the rearview mirror because we're 6 years away, gone from that. It's just nothing we say is going to change the result of that election. So it's just, that's a past issue. But
my thing is we can't. You can say, okay, just ignore what happened, but you can't ignore what happened because you have no hope of stopping it from happening again unless you get all that out and expose what happened and punish the people involved.
That's fine if there really was. Okay, so I am more of a skeptic on the broadness of all of this. I know that there are problems in the election system, and we've seen that there's issues that they've tried to fix. But one of the problems, this is of their own making for the Democrats in a lot of cases too. It's just that because we now have the early voting, we now have the endless mail-in voting almost. That type of thing has created that suspicion, has created the problems, has created the issues around that. our system was never really perfect. I mean, how do you have a real perfect system in this regard? Someone's always going to try to find a way to cheat and make an end run. Okay, that's what's going to happen. But the sheer volume of it with technology and everything like this is astounding up to what you can possibly do, with that. But especially when you have states that can't share or don't share voting records because people move from one state to the other. People who are really want to have they really want to be do some chicanery. They can vote in two places and may never get caught, because they can because you can register in multiple places and it doesn't get checked for years and years and years and stuff like that. So they've kind of created this monster. We need to kind of put that genie back in the bottle and go back to some of those more restrictive policies and say, look, we realize that this is convenience. And I'm on my wife and I are on Maryland's list of permanent mail, voters, if we desire to do so. I mean, that doesn't prevent us from going to vote in person, but we could easily just fill out a ballot and mail it and just forget it. And I admit I can be pretty lazy sometimes, but if you say we have a holiday for election day, one of the things about that is that it really takes away a lot of the left's argument about disenfranchisement and everything like this, because that is one word I hate a lot. Is like, because you hear that
you don't have enough votes is what it is.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So that that is brought up over and over and over again. It's like, don't give me that garbage. Okay. Forget this disenfranchisement. It's like, this is America. We're free. If you want to vote, you can go vote.
You can vote. Yeah.
It's
same as the driver's license thing. Like 98% of us have a driver's license. 99. It's like 98.9. So it rounds up to 99%. And of the 1% who don't, most of them, they're living off the grid up there with Roscoe Bartlett in the hills somewhere. They don't care any 1% who wins elections, or they're too crazy to vote. Right.
Well, there's this thing about Joe Scarborough, and he went off about how his wife Mika Brzezinski is like, well, she lost her birth certificate, so under the SAVE Act, she wouldn't be able to vote. It's like, have you heard of the fact that you can actually go and get a copy of you can get an original copy?
Somebody did it. Some woman did it online to show she had to assemble the marriage certificate and the birth certificate and her driver's license, and she did it all for like $14. And it was all in her hands in 4 days or something like that.
Yeah, you can have, depending upon what location it is. I mean, when I got my DC birth certificate, which I didn't know that I actually needed, and then it turned out I really probably did need it. But I went through. There's a service that you go through, and they actually work with a lot of these different states.
Records people, yeah,
and they do that. And I said, here it is, and I can't, pay them, I don't know, $20 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And in about a month's time, I had a birth certificate, which is the first time I've ever had my real birth certificate instead of the hospital certificate, which I didn't really realize for most of my life there was a difference, because every time I have taken that certificate from the hospital and I've used it every single time to get a government issued ID of any kind. And that has always been accepted. So, but now I've got this other document just in case I need it. But you can do it. I mean, it's like, hello, Joe Scarborough, come on.
The thing about it is like, Lori makes this point. Like, it should not be effortless to vote. It should not be, I just automatically alight upon the polling place station and I get to vote. Right? You ought to have to prove who you are. You ought to have to go to a step, make out a form, go somewhere and submit the form, or mail it in or whatever. It ought to be something that you reach out to do, because if it's just passive and just anybody can wander in and vote, you can't control for citizens, you can't control for felons, you can't control for anything that the people of the country have passed laws. Their representatives have passed laws saying these people are ineligible to vote. If you want to make them eligible to vote, we can have that argument too. But they don't, you have all kind of people who are in the country, or they're not citizens or whatever. They do not have the right to vote. So there should be something that you have to do to establish the right to vote, establish that you're a writer. That's right. Yeah, that's right. And then, and that's exactly what happened. Like in 2020, right? All the counting stopped at the same time when they realized they did not know how many votes they needed in Pennsylvania, right? They stopped all 7 states so they could say, okay, who do we make win by what? And they've already found, and they decided we're going to get you just over the hump in Georgia and Arizona. And the investigations there have already found enough votes that went to the wrong place to overturn those states. That Trump truly won those states. So, what do you do about it? You're right. We're not going to go back and say, oh, any bill Biden signed is null and void, right? We're going to keep working off of what he did, right? So you're not going to reverse it. But people need to know that, yes, it is capable to cheat a state in a presidential election, and it's worth finding the people who did it and throw them in jail.
Yeah, and I'm all in favor of tightening up the requirements.
Right. The other point I was meaning to make is the Trump administration is going around to these states and saying, let's clean up your voter rolls. And it's interesting who says no, right? Minnesota said no. Michigan said no. Maryland said no, right? Why did they say no? Because, they're left-leaning states that aren't as leftist as they claim. And, if you go cleaning up the rolls, they may not win elections anymore.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was on our Central Committee, I mean, one of the things that always drove me crazy was just the fact that, it was really hard to get your name, to get old names of people off the rolls. I mean, they had a series of rules in terms of before somebody could get removed, and it was kind of onerous and just ridiculous. It's like, so there's so many reforms that need to be made along those lines. And why do people complain about having to show the ID to prove who you are to be able to vote? This should not be an issue, but right. the left makes it an issue. And it's like, and that is not disenfranchisement. It's like, if you're a U.S. citizen, you have a right. You just show this. There are other countries in the world where you've got a national ID and you show it for almost everything that you do.
Right. And if you don't want us to have to show IDs, you shouldn't have let 30 million people in the country illegally.
That's right.
You did that. You did it on purpose. It wasn't an accident. Right. So now we have to check, because like before, the presumption, like when I was in Louisiana voting until I moved up here, we didn't have to worry about no non-citizens voting, right? That just was not a thing at all. But now you do. Now you have, whole parts of that state that are mostly seasonal farm workers working in those nurseries and whatnot.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on over there. We'll quickly move along here. So the administration has sent ICE workers into some of the airports.
Clean those lines up in an hour.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing is that they're not trained to operate the machinery, so they're not going to be doing those tasks. They're trying to free the employees up from other tasks to help do those other tasks. I don't know that. I don't think you have enough, ICE people to go in there and make a significant dent in this at this point. And
I mean, the lines disappeared almost immediately.
Well, here's the thing is that the lines, it's a weird thing, because the media is like all about the long lines. Okay, right. They want to pin this on the Trump administration, so they're going to the airports that are having problems, and Houston is having a huge problem. Atlanta is having some problem. But there are stories that come out from other people, that are not hyped up as much. That said, I was worried about the lines. I went to O'Hare and I got through in 25 minutes. It's like, okay, so it's a normal day. Okay, now no doubt, I am sympathetic to the TSA workers' economic plight, because they're not well paid and they haven't been paid. And so when you're a paycheck to paycheck person, this is a problem when you haven't been paid for a month. Okay, and a lot of them are now leaving and they're finding other jobs. Yeah. And that's one side of it. But the Republicans, it seems that they've been trying to, approach the Democrats saying, we will do this, we will do that. We can move this forward. We can get TSA funded again. And the Democrats are just holding firm about their requirements on ICE and immigration policy and stuff like this. And yet they're still blaming the Republicans for not paying the TSA workers.
Yeah. The funny was like Chris Murphy said, and we got to remember the illegal aliens are the most important thing here. No, they're not. That's in fact not the case, right? So that's part of their deal, and we're singing from entirely different songbooks now. I believe that if John Thune does not make this happen, get the Save America Act and get the funding across the finish line, that he will be replaced as majority leader.
That's a big call.
I believe the Senate it will remain in Republican hands, and I think they're going to get fed up with the inaction, and they're going to find somebody who can actually move the ball. I think that Susan Collins has had something of a political epiphany and has moved to the right fairly consistently in the last 2 or 3 years, and will not hurt us. I think. On the other side, Murkowski has moved to the left and votes with the Democrats now more than she does with the Republicans. We have Fetterman doing the same for us, so that one sort of cancels itself out. But I think Trump is right to, he has this huge bankroll, right? All these people keep writing off the Republicans in the midterms, but they have about 30 times as much money right now, literally, as the Democrats do. And I think if he uses some of that money to defeat Murkowski, that would be a good way to spend it.
Yeah, I tend to think, because there's so many things going on, I'm having a hard time getting a good read on where we're going in the midterms, because there, we'll have, I guess as we get to late summer, early fall, when there's going to be some early voting taking place in some of these states. We'll know that,
which should not be
right.
Right. I mean, think about here in Virginia,
but
we had this guy after early voting started, right? The state attorney general, right? It was revealed that he had mistreated a bunch of women, and then he was a blatant racist, right? All this came, undeniable racist comments and whatever came out after a bunch of votes had been cast.
Right, and in the old days, I mean, stuff like that could swing an election, because of these revelations that would come out. But nowadays, you don't really have as big an October surprise kind of a thing coming up, because the voting is taking place so far in advance. Right. Doing all this stuff, so they're already taking in a lot of votes before election day, and it just distorts the whole picture of what's going to happen there, with elections. But I think when we get within, say, 60 days, we'll get a better read, because then we'll know. He's like, is the Iran thing in our rearview mirror? Have we fixed that? Have gas prices come back down? Has Trump got a handle? And will the CPI reports and the employment reports show trends in the good position? GDP, economic reports, which people look at. Are they going to feel good about the economy? Feel good about where they are, so that they can vote. They'll vote to keep the Republicans in power. Those things I don't think will really be decided for several more months until we kind of get.
The other thing, there's a lot of people who say what you say about the economy, right? It'll depend on the economy, this and that, and the other. But the other thing is, it's there are two choices. It's a binary choice, right? So part of it is, do you really want to vote for them? Because they're getting crazier, right? They're getting less serious about governing the other side. So you do have that they're getting less votable. I mean, there's stories out today. Republicans have closed the gap in the generic congressional preference. Like, they've erased their deficit, and they're about 1.4 million ahead in voter registration since 2024. So they've gotten their numbers have grown relative to the Democrats by about 1.4 million. They're almost to parity. There's about to become more Republicans than Democrats in the country for the first time.
Yeah. All right. So the other thing I wanted to say just about the whole voter thing too is that it drives me crazy, particularly California, where we have to wait 3 to 4 weeks to get an election result in a congressional race in particular.
Right.
And this is just not the way it should be. It's like if we
And
had
what happened in those 4 weeks? Those 4 seats in Orange County, those 4 marginal seats in Orange County, the Republican was ahead in all four. And in all four, we waited enough weeks until enough votes were found that all of a sudden the Democrat barely slipped ahead.
Yeah,
Right?
I'm not going to say that I'm not even saying that there's anything any
Yeah,
fake.
who knows? But I mean, it's like
I'm
you have
just
no
saying that the fact that you allow
right.
absentee ballot voting to go on to begin with, that they get a huge number of people voting, and they've got all these ballots, and they're just terribly slow in counting them. It's like, no, the system's got to change. No one should have to wait 3 to 4 weeks to find out whether or not they've won a race,
Right.
and also to see what they thought was on election night was maybe a victory turn into a loss. That type of thing.
Right.
You should have a pretty definitive
Right.
idea.
And how can you trust a result where one candidate's ahead for a month and all of a sudden they're not ahead?
Yeah,
right. Even whether it's for you or against you, how do you trust that result? You know what I mean?
Right. It happens all over the country because there's just a lot of areas where they get all these ballots, and they don't deal with it very well, and that does leave open the possibility of some fraud, and there's no doubt. But it's just we have got to tighten that up and just say, go back to that stricture. It's like, if you're sick or I mean you're enfeebled, you're a soldier or whatever, that kind of thing, that's fine, but it has to be a very narrow band. Everybody else, you need to go to a poll. That's it. I mean, I would, I have no problem with that. And it'd be nice if you had to show an ID. And then I'd say, now we're finally getting back to safe, secure elections, and we can trust our system a lot more than we have been able to in the last several years.
Right.
All right. Along with that, just quickly, TSA, Elon Musk offered to pay for the salaries, but he can't do that. He can donate money to the Treasury, but Congress is the one which appropriates the money, so that's not going to work. But I do love Elon trying to step in. Look, I mean, I think there's probably not a problem if Elon did a charity thing of like sent money, send a bunch of gift cards.
I'm creating a fund. The fund could be used to pay these salaries, which he could do.
I mean, he could do it where he could just buy a ton of gift cards for food and gas and whatever, and have each airport hand out to the employees. It's like it's not a direct payment. It's just let the supervisors determine how to dole that out or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So the other one is one of the ways of solving this problem is to eliminate TSA, and that officially is now a solution that's in the basket of possible solutions to this, which would be a good thing. It should be done. That should be privatized immediately. Airport security had nothing to do with 9/11.
This is an agency. Look, the whole thing with with Homeland Security has grown into this monstrosity anyway, and so with that in of itself was a problem. TSA, I've grown to live with it. I don't love it. Privatizing would be fine. If you could find other alternatives that would be more effective, that's fine. I mean, I want to be able to get on my airplane and go where it is and feel that it's relatively secure, that we don't have any crazy people, trying to do stuff there. But in general, I mean, look, because TSA is not perfect, right? I mean, how many times has stuff gotten through there? Even when they've run their tests, they've missed knives and stuff like that. So they're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and it's just a lot of hassle for people to fly quickly. So you mentioned how kind of we see some flipping between Democrats and Republicans. Markwayne Mullin, who's now the DHS secretary, he got out of committee because of John Fetterman. Right. So this is how we're seeing things just change.
The other thing is like it should be noted that when Trump went looking for a successor to Kristi Noem, he looked at the Senate because senators generally confirm each other, even when they like, I don't know if you noticed, but like Cory Booker had nice stuff to say about Mullin in the run up to this vote. Cory Booker, he's like, yeah, I know Mark. I've gotten to know him pretty well. I think he'll be okay at this. And I don't know if he voted for it, against it, on final passage or whatever, but they know these people and it's more reasonable. And that's, you want to know why Trump hasn't gotten rid of Pam Bondi. It's because, put your thinking cap on and try to figure out somebody who's confirmable, who would do a better job.
Right.
Right.
All right. As we get to the last few things. So Barry Weiss has decided to shut down CBS Radio after nearly 100 years. I guess had probably run its course. We had an old friend of ours, at least at AIM, a guy named Wes Vernon, who's since passed on. He spent his entire career at CBS Radio, but he was kind of a mole for us at AIM. It was pretty funny. Yeah. He would call my father up and tell him some things, and then he would try to get a few things in on CBS Radio from the conservative side. But it was pretty rough work for a conservative to work at CBS Radio.
Yeah, they were rocks in the sports. CBS Radio Sports was an absolute rock, and as somebody who drives around a lot, listening to sports on the radio, that will be at some point a noticeable loss.
Yeah, but Barry Weiss continues to do a lot of things over at.
I mean, they're not really in the radio business, and it used to be you were sort of in the communications business, but now that's sort of bifurcated, right? And TV is TV, and print is print, and radio is radio. Yeah,
and all these companies are looking at how can they use streaming and monetize streaming.
Right,
it seems to be kind of the bottom line for everything. Christopher Columbus statue erected at the White House. I love it.
I do too.
I'm
a member of the Knights of Columbus.
I can't wait for Columbus Day to come around, and Trump's out there with Christopher Columbus and
with his arm around him, hugging him like he did the flag.
Give him a little gold leaf trim painting or something.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, like, what was wrong with Christopher Columbus? Like, ask a leftist to explain to you why his statue should have ever come down. The answers are just incomprehensible. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, well,
you think about the bravery it took to sail out into the ocean, not knowing if you would ever hit any land anywhere or what was out there, right? And then you get here, and I guess it was the West Indies or whatever, and you're the one who had the bravery to do that and to lead people to do that, assemble the 3 ships and all that kind of stuff. So he deserves a tremendous amount of credit, and there's nothing has happened that has improved the human predicament more than the founding of the United States of America. Nothing comes close.
Well, it's always all those leftists that want to rewrite history, and it's like, it's Indigenous Peoples Day now,
we're the indigenous people. I was born here. Me.
That's right.
That was another thing is, that's the other thing about like Western values. Okay. No, it was not their land. Where's their deed? They had no deed. The land had not been surveyed. Nobody owned anything. Okay. We came here and said, you can own things, right? And that if you own things, we will protect your property. That's the essence of the U.S. government. You can pursue your life, liberty, and pursuit and happiness, right? Because, we won't let somebody come sleep in your home, that you paid for. We'll recognize that you own the home and you get to keep it. Right. And that thing and enforcing that thing is what got us from basically the Stone Age when the U.S. started to where we are now. That is the essential ingredient to modernization.
Yep. All right. A few more things really quickly. You mentioned at the beginning of the show, March Madness. It continues tonight. Most of the top seeds are still there.
Yeah.
Florida got bounced.
I think Duke's in trouble into this time.
Yes, exactly. I was about to spit that out. Duke is the one in trouble. I think they've showed that they're missing their top players, and they've been getting by, but it's been the competition.
He gets outcoached. He's a great recruiter. He gets great players, but he gets out coached at some point.
Yeah,
He's not that level of coach.
You're going up against Arizona, Michigan State, Michigan, those guys. In the end, you can't survive this next gauntlet coming up. So that's going to be hard. Opening day, we have the Yankees whipping up on the Giants, and so we got a whole bunch more today. So that's great. It feels a little odd for me when I see opening day still in March, but they moved to that many years ago. And if you're in Chicago or places like that, you're going to be like, it might be a little cold.
Right. But is it a lot warmer next week? Not really.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So I mean, I sort of see, and you got a lot of these. You're trying to get in 162 games and be done with the playoffs before November. So it's a lot. It's a lot. So I get why they do it.
Yeah. Well, the baseball season has stretched out anyway. I mean, we used to have it. I think the World Series would be wrapped up a lot sooner, but
like the middle of October. But we've got extra rounds and extra teams.
Yeah, and extra TV money.
That's right. That's absolutely true. But I definitely was watching. I mean, they got my eyeballs. I know.
Yeah, no, I mean October baseball, and even early November baseball. I mean, it's great. It's great. Yeah, it's one of the best sports around.
Yeah, it's the best postseason.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah, look, they did I think we said before. They put on the best All-Star game, and they put on probably the best postseason.
Yeah, that's right.
Of all the professional leagues. And then finally, melancholy tribute to Chuck Norris, who passed away. Somewhere in this house, I have a picture of me with Chuck Norris from a trade show. It used to actually be on my refrigerator in my old house, but I think in the move, it got packed away. And I'm like, yeah, I'd love to be able to put that. I'd love to be able to put that back up on the fridge, just to when people come by the house, they're like, "Is that?" Trade shows like industry trade shows like that back in the day were great because they'd have some of these guys would have some of these stars, and they're like, "Yeah, they'll never know me from Adam, but I got a picture with them. Hey, why not?"
That's right.
So
it's like Nick Freitas said. He said Chuck Norris didn't die. he's just off winning the longest nap contest. This is a death looks under its bed for Chuck Norris.
All right, so that's it. We've gone a little bit long today, but we had a lot of things to throw in here to talk about today. Hope you enjoyed it. Please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anybody tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America. And we will be back next week at our regular day and time. So we'll see you next Wednesday. Thank you once again for everything. And that's a wrap.